Well, thank you for joining me again. And I want to get right into the text coming up on February 6th, the fifth Sunday in Epiphany. And it's the gospel reading from Luke 5, verses 1 through 11. Now, this is another great example of the magnificent storytelling ability of Luke, and in ways that are really quite subtle. This is a well-known story, but as I've often said, rather than rushing into what certain words might mean or what the story means or something of that kind, it's important to stop and ask, how is the story written? Finding the deeper meaning of what Luke is doing is not one of those great mysteries where we count how many Greek words occur in a single sentence and then multiplying by 54, as some of the TV evangelists want us to do, but rather looking at what Luke intends by how he writes. First of all, this story begins with one of those great storytelling introductions. There came a time when Jesus was standing and a lot of people had followed him. And he was by the seashore and saw these boats of the fishermen, and saw the fishermen. Their boats pulled up on the shore, washing their nets, tending their business. If you were a filmmaker and you had a couple of good drones and a little staff, all you need is this text from Luke, and you could make yourself a beautiful cameo film about what was happening, because it's visual. I want you to notice that the first part of the story is told in what we call recounting style. It's not highly dramatized. It's almost summarized. Jesus is surrounded by a crowd. They edge him toward the lake. He looks over, sees an empty boat, gets in the boat, tells the boat captain, move on out a little bit. And then, as in a pulpit, and by the way, this is where the pulpit idea comes from, he sits in the boat and addresses the crowd, teaching. That's the key word, teaching. But then we come to part two. And part two is highly dramatized. And by that I mean we have the introduction of not just a scene, but of dialogue. And the dialogue is between Jesus and Peter. Now, cleverly, Luke has included Mark's earlier story of the visit of Jesus to Peter's home, where his mother-in-law lies struck down with a fever. Remember, too, that the way Luke tells the story, but prior to this confrontation with Peter, there's a lot going on. Jesus is portrayed as being all over the place, exercising, teaching, proclaiming the nearness of the kingdom of God, teaching, preaching, etc. So a lot has been going on. And if you were to film this, for instance, because of everything that Jesus has been doing over an undisclosed amount of time, but clearly a lengthy period of time, you would pull back to 1,000 feet, let's say, and see people making their way from Galilean villages on down toward the seashore on the Lake of Galilee, or Tiberias. That would set the scene. But now you would have to have the camera come down in a much tighter focus. And the tighter focus would be on the interplay between Jesus and Peter. And it isn't just once or twice. It's no accident that Peter is identified by the storyteller by name 5 or 6 times, and one time with the 2 names, Simon Peter. What happens is an exchange between Jesus and Peter that has depth to be explored. Jesus says to Peter, put out to the deep, let down your nets. And here Luke reveals that he is really a citizen of the Mediterranean world. He knows all these sailing terms and fishing terms, and they're technical terms in some senses. So it's very, very realistic what's going on here. Launch out, says Jesus. Let down your nets. What becomes evident is different from Mark. Simon Peter is part of a fishing conglomerate with the Zebedean brothers, James and John. They have boats and they have nets in the plural. This is an interesting circumstance. Upon being ordered to go out to fish again, Peter addresses Jesus in a very, very rare way in the New Testament. He calls him epistata. Now, you're going to see this translated quite probably correctly as master. But what I want to tell you is that that term in its ancient Greek entire context would be something like captain. And in particular, a really good illustration of its use would be the headmaster or coach in a Greco-Roman gymnasium where youth are brought to prepare them for citizenship. That's how Peter addresses him. Also, we have to talk about some gap filling that has to be going on. Now, Peter has met Jesus. His mother-in-law was set right by Jesus. And Peter, being in a very populous part of Galilee, the comings and goings of professional fishermen, all up and down the coast, he has heard a great deal. And then we have to fill the other gap. Is he sitting there also on the shore, having caught nothing all night long, tending his nets, listening to Jesus? Or is the boat that Jesus commands his boat? So you see, Luke leaves these delicious, unnarrated details for us to ponder. It's just fun stuff. Peter objects to Jesus' command. And if you let me have a little playful fun with this, Peter is saying something like, look, I know your reputation. You healed my mother-in-law. I've heard you speak. I've heard about the wonderful things you're doing. I think you're bringing a message that is just vital for our times here. And thank goodness God has sent you as a prophet. But let me tell you, I don't think you know fishing. I know fishing. And let me tell you, we broke our backs all night hauling these nets in and out of the boats. There is nothing there to be caught. And then it ends by saying, however, at your word, and there's no Greek to be explained here, it's at your word, at your saying, at your command, even though I know better, I will do it. So they get out in the boat and they have this miraculous catch of fish. And then Luke, the narrator, says something like this. Yeah, and having seen this huge load of fish, they became fearful. This is not just a great teacher. This is not just a prophet. This is somebody so powerful as to command the fishes to fill our nets. And they're fearful. And Peter, in this great act of spontaneity that Luke describes so well, just falls to his knees and said, get away from me. You are too holy and I am too much the sinner. Just get away. And of course, Jesus immediately then commands them not to be afraid, because the company with Peter has also done the same thing, fallen on their knees. And then it concludes at the place most people take the meaning from. Get up, never be afraid. I'm going to make you a catcher of people, or as the old King James said, a fisher of men. Huh? But it's a catcher. It's a word rarely used, but it is used once in the New Testament. But it's a good Greek verb. It refers to things like catching fish and animals and so forth. It becomes a symbol later for the church itself, quite rightly. They put their boats on the seashore and then leave. Now, if you go to Acts 10 and read about Peter's vision at the housetop and the subsequent command to go preach to the Gentiles, it follows exactly the same format. And that's why this story is here in Luke 5. It's going to have to be over Peter's objections to what he knows to be true to see the full import of the kingdom good news that Jesus was speaking. In Luke 5, Peter knows fishing. In Acts 10, Peter knows that his mission is to Jews, not to unclean Gentiles. In both cases, Peter's inherited understandings have to be submitted to a higher calling. And this is a calling. Peter doesn't know it. He's being tested here. The fact that he says, I know fishing, I'm not going to go fishing, it's useless, but at your command, means he passes the test. And the test is, do you have it within you to change everything you think you know in obedience to the word coming from God, that all peoples are the subject of God's searching righteousness and God's kingdom. That's allowing Luke's literary talent to help us get to the deeper aspects of this meaning. Well, it's a little bit long today, but thanks so much for following. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.